Okay. Welcome to the regularly scheduled board meeting of the Washington Unified School District, June 10th, 2021 at 5:30 p.m. We are going to open session and we'll start by taking the roll. Vice President Wong.
Present.
Trustee Kirby Gonzalez.
Present.
Clerk Venegas.
Present.
Trustee Barnes.
Present.
And I too am present. Announcement of items to be discussed in closed session. Announcement of items to be discussed in closed session. E1, Government Code Section 54957, Public Employee Discipline Dismissal Release. E2, Government Code Section 54957.6, Conference with Labor Negotiators, WSTA, CSEA, and Management. E3, Government Code Section 54957B1, Public Employee Performance Evaluation Superintendent Draft Goals. Is there any public comment for closed session?
No public comments received.
Okay. Since we have no public comments received, we shall adjourn into closed session reopening at 6:30. Thank you.
Vaccinated? Yes. Can we take off masks for CDC rules? No, but they're not. I don't think we should do it until.
Wah wah.
That as well, summer.
Okay, we are back, and let's go with our roll call. Trustee Kirby Gonzalez.
Here.
Vice President Wong.
Present.
I too am present. Clerk Venegas. And Trustee Barnes.
Here.
All right. Let's go to the Pledge of Allegiance. Can we get our newest member of the team, Colby New, to lead us on the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Announcement of action taken in session. Oh, you're right.
I'm fine. I'm just ready to be off. Don't mind me.
E1, Government Code Section 54957, Public Employee Discipline Dismissal Release Information Receipt. E2, Government Code Section 54957.6, Conference with Labor Negotiators, WSTA, CSEA, and Management Information Received. E3, Government Code Section 54957B1, Public Employee Performance Evaluation Superintendent. Draft goals discussed, information received. Let's go to now the approval of the agenda. Is there any items that we need to pull on the agenda or any movements to the agenda? Seeing and hearing none, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I move.
Moved by Vice President Wong.
I second.
Second by Clerk Venegas. Roll call vote. Trustee Kirby Gonzalez.
Hi.
Vice President Wong.
Aye.
I too vote aye. Clerk Venegas. And Trustee Barnes.
Aye.
All right. The agenda is approved. Let's go to J, Communications and Celebrations. J1, Recognition of the 2021 Washington Unified School District Employees of the Year and Retirees. Gorgos Kazanis.
Thank you, President Pizzotti and trustees. As you know, the school year has already concluded, but one of our most prized celebrations at the end of every school year is to actually celebrate our employees of the year, as well as our employees who have reached specific milestones in terms of their years of service in Washington Unified, as well as our retirees. Given the restraints of COVID-19 and capacity restrictions with having guests invited to our board meetings, also coupled with the fact that it is summer recess and it is hard to get folks to come to our school board meetings in the summertime, we wanted to provide a quick overview of these recipients and honorees for this year. So I'm just going to start going down the list. Our elementary teacher of the year was Hugh Boyenga, SDC preschool teacher from Elkhorn Village School. Our secondary teacher of the year is Betsy Erickson, PE teacher from River City High School. Our classified employee of the year for support services is Monica Valadez, homeschool liaison, and she's a district-wide employee. Support staff person of the year is Belinda Rab Patterson, principal from Stonegate. Our classified employee of the year, maintenance operations and transportation, is Felipe Zatarain, custodian at Stonegate. Classified employee of the year, paraeducator Renita Devi, paraeducator 3 from Westmore Oaks. Classified employee of the year for child nutrition, Carrie Mummert. She's a cook manager at Riverbank. And our classified employee of the year for transportation, Angie Valencia. She's a senior bus driver. Our Salute to Educator Award this year goes to Christine Myers, Youth Outreach Specialist at Yolo High School. And our Individual and Program Excellence Award, I don't think there's any debate over this one, goes to our Food Services Department. As you all know, they've been working diligently, even during the closure of last year. They've been nonstop throughout the summer months, all school year long, and they're continuing to do meal service again, starting next week for our summer months as well. And then a couple of our folks that were camera shy, our classified employee of the year, office technical, Tammy Vito from the payroll benefits technician from fiscal services. And our volunteer of the year is Alicia Gutierrez from River City High School. Now, because these lists are extensive, we're not going to go name by name, but we did want to recognize the employees that reached their specific service years of service milestones for 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, and 35 years of service to Washington Unified and the community here in West Sacramento. So a big round of applause to everyone for that. And last but not least, we are also celebrating our retirees for this year. So let's see if I can bring up the presentation or do a screen share real quick. Mario, if you're able to bring it up, do you mind? I don't have access to that right now. As Mario's bringing up the presentation for the retirees, I'm just going to go down the list. So our first retiree is Tammy Vito, again, from our Fiscal Services Department. We wanted to point out with these particular slides, the years of service that these individuals have dedicated to Washington Unified as they retire this year. And what else is unique is the amount of positions that they've held in Washington Unified and the different roles that they've had for our community throughout that time. So Tammy Vito is retiring after 27 years in Washington Unified. Our next retiree is Carmencita Katigbak Teixeira. She's a 912 Special Education Resource Specialist, and she's retiring from Yolo High School after 28 years of service to the district. Our next retiree is Michelle George, Campus Aide from Stonegate, and she's retiring after 32 years of dedicated service in Washington Unified. Carmen Alcala, Paraeducator 1 for preschool. She's retiring from Stonegate this year, and she has served in Washington Unified for 23 years as well. I've had the pleasure of working closely with Alexander Samariak from River City High School, our homeschool liaison. He's a huge help anytime we do outreach in the community for our Russian-speaking community. He's been in Washington Unified for 28 years. Our next retiree is Susan Lee, School Secretary 1. She's retiring from Southport this year, and she's been in the district for 23 years. Next is Leanne Thorpe, one of our school nurses. She's retiring after 7 years in the district. Tim Grisafi is retiring as a 4th grade teacher from Westfield, and he's been with Washington Unified for 16 years. Carrie Korwitz, kindergarten teacher from Riverbank, is retiring after 29 years of dedicated service in Washington Unified. Catherine Senna, noon duty supervisor, retiring from Southport after 13 years in Washington Unified. Antonina Rosecrans, 2nd grade teacher, is retiring from Southport after 21 years of service in Washington Unified. Shauna Hefner, paraeducator 3, retiring from Southport after 15 years of service in Washington Unified. And our last retiree for this year is Shirley Fagu, intervention specialist, retiring from the Educational Services Department after 27 years of dedicated service in Washington Unified. So with that, that's the end of our presentation. We did want to just extend a big hearty congratulations and a thank you for all of this year's honorees. All the individuals that are celebrating specific milestone years of service in Washington Unified as they continue to work in Washington Unified, and those who are closing this chapter with us after so many years of dedicated service. So thank you and congratulations.
Thank you, Yogurus. We appreciate that celebration and congratulations to all the retirees that are leaving us. You've got a well-deserved retirement in your future. Moving on now to the association reports. K1 CSEA report. Is there anybody here from CSEA?
President Pizzotti, I had confirmed with Daniel that he was going to be present, but I don't think he dialed in tonight.
Okay. And nobody from WSTA?
Correct. Mr. Knapp said that he wasn't going to partake.
Okay, so we will move on to public comments. Is there anyone wishing to speak on a public comment that is on the phone? It looks like we have one person with their hand up. Before we have public comment, let me read the public comment disclaimer. Members of the public may address the board on the topics of our board agenda in addition to topics that are under the jurisdiction of the board and are not on the agenda, although the board by law may not take action at this meeting. The board may limit the total time for public input on any topic to 20 minutes unless it chooses to waive the item limit for the particular item. Individual speakers may be limited to 3 minutes to comment on any topic. Public comments consisting of individual charges, complaints, or derogatory remarks about any district employee are requested to be submitted in writing to the administration in accordance with the district's complaint procedure. As such, the board reminds the public that the district has existing board policy that allows the public to lodge a complaint against district employee. This provides a comprehensive procedure for reviewing and responding to public complaints. This process provides a more thorough opportunity to be heard than is allowed under the open meeting law that governs this meeting. The board respects the rights of members of the public to speak regarding matters on the agenda and other matters within the jurisdiction of the board. However, it is important for members of the public to recognize that comments regarding students other than the speaker's own children may be made during a public board meeting may be legally actionable as a violation of student privacy. Both state and federal law prohibit the board and others from discussing confidential student information in open session. To this end, be advised that if you reference a student's name other than your own, you will be out of order and your comments may not be protected by the privileges that protect public speech. You could be found liable for such comments in legal proceedings. Furthermore, it is important for the public to understand that negative or derogatory comments made against district employees or others, even those made in a public board meeting, may be actionable civil defamation. And with that, Danny Langford, go ahead.
You guys are going to be surprised, but I didn't put in a request to speak yet tonight.
Oh,
Thank you.
your hand was raised. I didn't know if you were meaning to talk on public comment or on an item.
I didn't mean to raise my hand. I asked
okay.
earlier if you guys were still in closed session. That's all.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Danny. Yep. Okay, we do have one public comment submitted by Gail Costello, retired school teacher, and is a general public comment. The comment is, it is time to schedule in-person board meetings and allow our citizens to attend in unlimited numbers. The public has been locked out of your meetings for over a year, and we want to see you and hear you up close and in person, and for you to see us in person. There is a lot of damaging crap being taught to American children throughout the country, and we need to be reassured that there is no official curriculum being presented that promotes CRT and teaches our children to look at each other only as skin color or color groups. We also need to be reassured that no WSD teachers are forcing CRT in their own classrooms outside of what the adopted curriculum is. Any teacher that insists on presenting white privilege lectures, group exercises, or questionnaires, etc., should be dismissed this summer. Okay. Moving on. M1, public hearing. I'm gaveling in the public hearing for the WSD Local Control Accountability Plan for 2021 through 2024. Let's see, I believe Stephanie Grote, is she presenting on this?
Yeah. She's on right now.
Okay, I'm sorry. Oh, there she is. Hi, Stephanie. Go ahead.
I'm here. Good evening. Mario, can we have the presentation, please?
Yes, I'm pulling it up right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent, thank you. Good evening, President Pizzotti, board members, Superintendent Hildreth, and community members. This evening, we're presenting the Washington Unified School District LCAP. Next slide. The topics of the presentation will include an overview, a budget overview for parents, the annual update, which we saw previously for the previous LCAP, as well as the LCP, as well as the LCAP moving forward, and we'll discuss the next steps in the process. As you are all aware, the attached document is very lengthy, and it contains all of these items. The intent of the presentation is to provide an overview, answer any questions, receive feedback and suggestions. Next slide. As a review of the LCAP is a 3-year plan that describes the goals, actions, services, and expenditures to support positive student outcomes that address state and local priorities. The LCAP allows us to tell our story in a way that is readable and understandable to the public. Throughout the plan, you will see wording that is in many of our other plans, such as in our LCP and our AB 86 plan that was previously approved. Next slide. The LCAP, it contains both the budget overview for parents, the annual update for the 1920 LCAP, as well as the new LCAP. The first part that we are going to review is the budget overview for parents. So I'm going to ask Director of Fiscal Services, Kylie Lane.
Thank you, Stephanie. I will have the next 3 slides, and I think this slide is very familiar that we've actually seen this format here of just the pieces of the pie as far as the funding that we receive in LCFF And the portion that is actually generating the supplemental concentration grants, which is the high need students, the foster youth, the English learners, and the low income. And further on in our presentation, we talk about budget, kind of break down all the other state, local, and federal funds. But this just gives you an idea of the LCFF funding, how much we are actually generating the supplemental concentration funds. Next slide. So this has the budgeted expenditures. So total budgeted expenditures that will be seen in the 21-22 budget. And you're going to probably see that it's increased quite a bit. And part of that is because of the ESSER 3 funds that we will be posting in the 21-22 year. So of course, that's about $16 million. So of course, we have the expenditures on the offset side. And we'll go into detail more about that, just about how that kind of works out, because in our estimated actuals in the 2021 year, we do have the ESSER 2, the expenditures of the ESSER 1, and then of course when we close the books, if there's carryover, we'll then post that at first interim into the 21-22 budget. So you'll see that that continues to grow until we fully expend all of those funds. And this piece just shows the total number of budgeted expenditures of the Lcap of being 12 million of that of our total expenditures. Next slide. This is actually from the Learning Continuity Plan for the 2021 year of our expected or expenditures that we budgeted for the high needs students in the LCP, and then the actual expenditures as we see them closing out the year in the 2021 year. A lot of this has to do because we did have the additional funds of the CARES funding, the ESSER 2 funding, and then of course the virtual learning this year, and the expenditures being much less than what we see just due to the activities that we didn't see for the year end. Some of the supporting materials, a lot of that was covered, that fell under the whole COVID and the pandemic and the additional funding that we did receive. Next slide. And I will pass it back over to Stephanie, and she will go into the annual update of the Lcap.
Thank you. So the annual updates for the 2019-20 Lcap were shared at the May 27th board meeting. This is just an example of the metrics and the outcomes, as well as the planned actions and budgeted expenditures and actual expenditures from that Lcap in the annual update. Next slide. This section in the previous presentation was actually said in progress, so we wanted to include this time. What has additionally been highlighted is an example of a description of how the funds budgeted were not implemented. So in some of the areas, as you saw in the previous slide, there were some funds that we had planned to spend, however, we did not spend. So within that annual update, this has been updated. You will see that several of the descriptions include reference to COVID-19. Also included in this section are the successes as well as the challenges in implementing each action. This part is included in the plan in the annual update for each of the goals. Next slide. Also part of that annual update was the annual update for the LCP. Again, this was previously shared and highlighted at the board meeting. So this is just a repeat in regard to that description, the total budgeted funds, the estimated actual expenditures, as well as the description of if there were any differences within what was planned and budgeted and the actuals. Next slide. This is again an example from the distance learning plan where we list the successes and challenges in implementing our distance learning program within the LCP. Next slide. The annual update also includes an analysis, an overall analysis. So as we were reflecting, there were some very clear things that we wanted to highlight in regard to clearly identifying metrics and actions. Academic support for students is necessary. The social emotional well-being of students continues to be important, as well as stakeholder input is imperative to building a strong community. Next slide. This next section, we're actually going to move into our Lcap. This is just another slide. As you know, I always like to include a reference to our 8 state priorities that our Lcap is aligned to. So you can see the graphic on the left, as well as the listing of the conditions of learning, what falls under that, as well as pupil outcomes and engagement. Next slide. Included in the Lcap, we have reflections of success from Washington Unified School District. These successes are from the 2019 California dashboard. As you look through them, you can see we looked at chronic absenteeism, suspension rate, graduation rate, college and career, English language arts, and math. These are all areas that various stakeholders, as well as the data, showed were successes. One thing that often comes up is what goes into college and career. How is that measured? College and career is measured on the number of graduates who complete rigorous coursework, pass challenging exams, receive a state still, and this can be accomplished by CTE pathway completion, grade 11 Smarter Balance assessments, AP exams, college credit courses, which previously were called dual immersion, A through G completion, the state seal of biliteracy, or through military science and leadership. Next slide. Not just looking at our California dashboard, but also included in our successes, we wanted to look at our goals and what we have done in successes in meeting our goals. So for goal 1, and these are our previous goals. So in looking at our standards aligned learning, interventions during and after school, looking at educational opportunities with equitable access, such as our ELD schedules reflecting that students are receiving that support, as well as our dual immersion enrollment. Our goal 3, looking at our high quality teaching and learning, continuing with that professional learning time. Goal 4, school climate. Looking at, we did begin our work with transformative justice, as well as the implementation of positive behavioral interventions and supports, PBIS for short, as well as our community engagement with our increased engagement through virtual meetings in some areas and some meetings. Next slide. So not only do we want to look at our successes, but we also wanted to identify our needs. So through the review of the data, as well as through that stakeholder input, the following needs were identified. So in looking at the California dashboard, chronic absenteeism, suspension rate, graduation rate, college and career, English language arts, and math were all areas that we identified as needs, as well as looking at ELA, English language arts, and math, the academic performance within certain subgroups of students. Our students with disabilities, foster youth, English learners, homeless, Hispanic, and African American. These needs are addressed in our draft Lcap, in our goals, our metrics, and our actions. Next slide. So some of the highlights from the Lcap are looking at a continued focus on our MTSS, realizing that we do want to provide a multi-tiered system of support for our students, both academically and social-emotionally, professional learning for all staff, as well as support for identified subgroups, a focus on equity, as well as the cycle for continuous support. One of the main highlights, as was previously brought up, is that we have actually gone from 5 goals to 3 goals. Next slide. Stakeholder engagement. The stakeholder engagement section of the Lcap details the vast amount of stakeholder engagement Washington Unified School District engaged in. Now, this began in the fall of 2019 when we began developing the Lcap before it was suspended due to COVID. The specific sections include a summary of the stakeholder process, as well as how stakeholder engagement was considered before finalizing the Lcap. So for example, it discusses the shared presentations that were shared across stakeholder groups. So to ensure that the same information was received, the same presentations were used. A summary of the feedback provided by the stakeholder group is included, such as the stakeholder groups, and we did include the town forums within this as was requested. A description of the aspects of the LCAP and that were influenced by the stakeholder input within the LCAP. An example is through the Parent Advisory Committee, as well as the EL Parent Advisory Committee. They expressed the need for additional support for students who were struggling. And as both groups spoke positively about the work of the intervention specialist, there has been an addition of those in the LCAP to support struggling students, as well as other personnel. These are just examples throughout that document. There are many more. Next slide. So these are our draft goals. This has been shared previously. Goal 1, looking at college and career readiness and providing that equitable access for educational opportunities for all students by supporting high quality teaching and learning, multiple pathways for success, and professional learning that's aligned to college and career readiness. Looking at our culture and climate, providing an equitable and positive educational environment to all schools to ensure students and staff will have safe and supportive climate, as well as our parent and goal 3, parent and community engagement. And that's to provide opportunities for engagement for all stakeholders and to also receive that feedback to support student learning. And the stakeholders do, of course, include our students as well. Next page. Next slide. So just quickly to highlight some of the items that are in each of the goals. So goal 1 has been developed to address the specific academic needs of students. We do recognize that there is a gap, an achievement gap based on race, income, language, and ability in some areas. And this includes the need for additional support in the area of professional learning, as well as personnel. For the 2020 school year, we did that's our population of students. And then we, of course, are committed to closing the gap through all necessary outcomes and actions outlined in the LCAP. Next page. Goal 2 has been developed to address the culture and climate at the school sites. Of course, we recognize the culture and climate is important to student academic and social success. We do want to focus on creating a caring and supporting environment by providing support and enrichment to students through creating a positive environment. And then this goal also recognizes the need to recruit and retain highly qualified staff. Next slide. Goal 3 was developed in recognition that Washington Unified School District truly is a community that we support one another. So this is embodied within our mission statement, and we do want to continue that work to support our students and our community and our stakeholders. Next slide. Okay, so this is part of the LCAP. Within each goal, we have identified metrics and outcomes. The outcomes, if you look all the way to the far right, are the desired outcomes for 23-24, for 2023-24. And when you look at the year 1, year 2, and year 3 outcomes, that is actually where we will report the outcomes once we do the analysis of where we are moving towards those desired outcomes. For goal 1, we have 8 metrics and 24 actions. Goal 2 has 4 metrics and 11 actions. Goal 3 has 4 metrics and 9 actions. This is just an example of one of the measuring and reporting from goal 2, but throughout the LCAP, where as it was attached, you can see the various metrics and outcomes. Next slide. This is an example of an action from goal 2. As you can see, it lists the action number so that we can refer to that. That also does assist in the accounting and monitoring of the funds that are spent towards that. It has a title. It gives a description of the action, as well as the total funds, and then whether or not it is contributing or not. Next slide. Which I'm sure your next question was, how do you know if it's contributing or not? This slide explains that. So the actions that are contributing to meet the increased or improved services required as described in the increased or improved services section at the end of the LCAP. Now, these actions are funded partly or fully by the LCFF supplemental grant funds and intended to increase or improve services for unduplicated students. We saw this previously in the budget overview for parents, where you could see the graph. An example of this would be our summer programs. Although not completely funded by LCFF supplemental grant funds, portions of it are. The increase or improved services action at the end of the LCAP, if you go through and you look at where the budget items are, does include other services that are not funded by supplemental grant funds. For example, the intervention specialists are paid for out of Title I, therefore they're not listed as contributing. However, they are at the end and included in that graph or that chart. Next slide. A few things to remember in regard to our plan. The LCAP is aligned to and reflects the 8 state criteria. The LCAP does reflect the board priorities as well as looking at targeting our specific subgroups, including our English learner, foster youth, and low-income students. Next slide. For the next steps in the LCAP, we are here tonight. It's a public hearing to receive feedback. We will request the board approval of the LCAP at the board meeting on June 24th. And then upon that approval, the LCAP will be sent to the Yolo County Office of Education, as well as posted on our website. Next slide. So that was an overview in regard to our LCAP, our budget overview for parents, as well as our annual update. So at this time, we have board comments, discussion, feedback.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is there any public comment on this public hearing?
No public comments have been received.
Okay, I'll turn it over to the board for the public hearing questioning. Do we have any questions from the board? Sarah or Jackie? Either?
One or the other. Who would you like to?
Madam Vice President, go ahead.
Thank you for this, Stephanie. Just a quick question. A lot of this sounds familiar with aligned to the ESSER. Just wanted to confirm a lot of this is not necessarily new, but was part of the larger discussion as well.
And in regard to
The
can
plan.
you repeat the question?
Just wanted to confirm that a lot of this is familiar because it was also
Yes.
covered in the ESSER, the ESSER
Yes.
discussion. So is there anything specifically new and different from the last time we heard about the alignment? I know it was more of a framework last time, but a lot of it's familiar, and I just wanted to, I'm a little bit aged, so I have slight memory loss sometimes. So I just wanted to confirm that.
So much of the wording is actually exactly the same as the plan, as the AB 86 plan that was brought, as many of the same requirements in regard to stakeholder input and feedback was received. So much of the wording is similar. The LCAP does, however, have the specific goals and actions and metrics aligned to it. Correct.
Yeah, no, okay. No, I just appreciate it. I was looking at the metrics, and I really appreciate you kind of you and the team highlighting that. So thank you.
Of course.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Madam Vice President. Trustee Kirby Gonzalez.
Okay, thank you so much for this. My question, which I think was gone through, but I just really want to call it out and make sure that I have an answer that I can relay to the public as well, is that our A through G numbers are the highest that they've been, yet it also calls out in the challenges that we fell short for our graduating seniors. So can you just add a little bit more clarity around that for us?
Correct. So I did have a chance to reach out to the high school administration too, just in regard to that. One of the questions that came up was it due to COVID? And of course, that did actually create a barrier in regard to students completing that. So within our A through G, yes, it is higher. However, we did not meet the goal. And then within the new goals that were addressed, we did look at what our current rate was, and then based a new goal for 23-24 based upon the data that we have. Some of the things that the high school is looking at is, of course, developing those plans with students from early on so that they do meet those requirements, as well as they did receive a grant that will help with the freshmen and be more targeted towards having them make a plan to meet those requirements.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And I know that this was developed with community input. It's really good. You know, I really appreciated reading through it all. And I'm wondering though, is there another opportunity to share it with the public? Do we anticipate this being put out through an email blast? I know in the past we've always run it out with surveys. So is there another opportunity to share this plan with the public before we approve it?
Correct. Yes, and it has been on display in a hard copy for our families as well at the district office. But yes, families do have an opportunity to provide input. So,
thank you.
Great, thank you, Trustee Kirby-Gonzalez. Clerk Venegas, no. Trustee Barnes, no. Thank you. I just wanted to say this is information we've seen before in many different forms, and thank you, Stephanie and Kylie, for putting this together, and we really appreciate your hard work, and as well as the community input on this as well. So thank you very much. And with that, I gavel. Oh, wait, I did not gaveling yet. Go ahead.
Yeah, just one thing that I did want to bring up in regard to next time. When it comes back for approval, you will also see the school SIPSAs come back in June as well, as they are aligned. We know the board just recently approved those in December because there was a delay. However, the intent is to have those SIPSAs aligned to the Lcap, which makes complete sense. So you will see those come back, excuse me, at the next meeting as well.
Great, thank you. And are you sure now I can gavel out? Okay, I will gavel out of this public hearing and into the next. Public hearing for the Washington Middle College High School Local Control Accountability Plan for 2021 through 2024. You're up.
I'm up again. Mario, can you put up this new presentation, please? And I will say that Principal O'Neill is on the call as well, so he can assist if there's any questions specific to his plan. Okay, so you will notice many of the slides are very similar, if not exactly the same, as we do work closely with Washington Middle College High School, as well as Principal O'Neill, to ensure that there is continuity of the plan. Next slide. This plan also includes the requirements in regard to the overview, the budget overview for parents, the annual update of the LCP, as well as the LCAP itself, as well as the next steps in the LCAP process. Next slide. Again, the LCAP is a 3-year plan that describes the goals and actions. These are specific to Washington Middle College, although some of them you will see are part of the district as well. This is a great opportunity to provide a story to the Washington Middle College families in public in regard to what the school provides. Next slide. For the budget overview for parents, I'm actually going to turn it over to Ms. Lane.
Thank you. So same concept here of the LCFF funding. It has a percentage that's broken out for the supplemental concentration with the funding for those students that generate the high need portion of that being the foster youth, the English learners, and the low income. And then, of course, the other funds that are included in there, but a majority of their funding comes from the ADA enrollment with the local control funding. So next slide. And of that, these are the budgeted expenditures. So the total budgeted expenditures that are projected for the 21-22 year. And then, of course, the budgeted expenditures that are in the LCAP of that portion as well, with just the step and column, personnel, and consumables, material and supplies, those types of services. Next slide. And this is of the learning continuity plan budgeted was almost 7 million in the 2021 year. And we actually exceeded that amount quite a bit. And we did have the increase of the improved services for the high need students. So this was due to purchases of technology for Chromebooks for our students. Next slide. And I will pass it over to Stephanie.
So similar, exactly the same to the Washington Unified School District outcomes within the LCAP annual update. You can see that there are metrics. These were taken directly from the Washington Middle College LCAP, as well as then the actual outcome. The planned actions and services are detailed, as well as the budgeted expenditures and the actual expenditures. And this example is directly from Washington Middle College's LCAP. Next slide. Again, within that annual update, it is included a description of how the funds were budgeted for, where they were not implemented, as well as the description of the successes and challenges in meeting that goal. Next slide. This is an example from the LCP in-person instructional offerings of the LCP annual update. This is looking at the PPE as well as the sanitation supplies. You will notice that this number is a little bit higher, and then at the bottom of the slide, you can see that the acquisition of additional sanitation supplies was necessary to provide students and staff with that safe working environment. So there was an increase in that actual expense. Next slide. And then the actions related to the LCP annual update in regard to the distance learning program, you can see here within the plan, the highlighted successes as well as the challenges. Next slide. For an overall analysis of the annual update, you can see that really in reviewing that, they're extending the counseling hours, and you'll see that in the LCAP going forward was very beneficial, as well as regular communication to connect to the college partners. And this in the LCAP, you will also see an establishing of baseline data. As you know, the enrollment has actually changed quite a bit since the original LCAP in 2017. Next slide. This slide, again, shows our 8 priorities that we want to ensure that our LCAP focuses on is aligned to. Next slide. In reviewing the successes of Washington Middle College, it has grown over the last 4 years, looking at 35 students to 164 with the expected enrollment of 224. So again, it continues to grow. The other highlights include it mirrors the enrollment demographic percentages pretty closely of the school district, and that was something that is in both of the LCAPs, as we want to ensure that we're offering those alternative programs to students. Looking at our EL students, as well as our demographics and purchasing of Chromebooks. Our suspensions are declining, but again, it is noted that the population size may skew that percentage. It's a simple math. If you have more, if you have more students, you can have more suspensions. Not that he has more suspensions, but that's how the percentages work. And then of course, the chronic absenteeism has decreased in this last year. Next slide. In reviewing the information and through stakeholder input, the identified needs are identified there. Again, really looking at the recruitment efforts, focusing on changing the message, and looking at the growth that's continuing to grow. So you'll see some actions throughout the LCAP highlighting those needs. Next slide. The key features of the LCAP include the continued focus on multi-tiered system of supports, as well as creating a clear path to improving school-specific outcomes, such as students who complete their AA degree, as well as targeted support to increase the school counselor hours. The Washington Middle College also went from 5 goals to 3. They are the same 3 goals within the district LCAP. Next slide. Specific to the stakeholder input, Washington Middle College community and families are invited to attend all of the district stakeholder meetings, as well as there were additional stakeholder engagement specific to Washington Middle College, including parent morning coffees, advisory committee meetings, as well as staff meetings and input meetings from the staff. Next slide. Here, of course, are goals and actions. Again, these are the same goals and actions of Washington Unified School District. Next slide. Thank you. Sorry, Mar. And again, they've been developed in conjunction with Washington Unified School District, and really to make sure that that is equitable as possible. Next slide. This is an example of within the LCAP, looking at measuring and reporting results, with the metric being PBIS implementation, and then looking at the baseline of what has occurred, and then the desired outcome for 23-24. Next slide. As well as here's an example of the actions that are specific to goal 2. This one is looking at professional development. Of course, the Washington Middle College teachers do have an opportunity to attend the professional learning that is put on by the district. However, there are specific things that they would attend outside of what the district is offering. Next slide. This is an example of the contributing and non-contributing. The examples that are given within this slide really looking at the partially or fully funded with supplemental grant, such as the AVID program was listed as one of the actions. And then an example given for that is not included or not funded by the LCFF is the intervention support, the before and after school, which is funded by Title I. Next slide. So again, the LCAP is aligned and reflects the 8 state criteria, as well as it reflects the board priorities. The LCAP from Washington Middle College does address the following subgroups with English learners, foster youth, and our low income students. Next slide. The charter is a little bit different in regard to the next steps, where he's looking for, of course, feedback, as well as will request the board approval, and then it'll be posted on the district website. I will say, sorry, Kobe, before you turn it on, Washington Middle College will also have a SIPSET coming back at the same time that they have their LCAP. So you will get to see specifically those funds targeted in that plan as well.
Okay.
Now I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. Well, and since I know Principal O'Neill is on the line, I just wanted to give him this opportunity to make 2 cents worth of comments if he has any inclination to do so.
Thank you, President Pizzotti. Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to say thank you really to Stephanie and Kylie for their support in bringing these 2 things together, the district plan and bringing our plan up to speed with that. Thank you.
Thank you. On that, do we have any public comment on this public hearing?
No public comment received.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much. Now the public hearing is before the board. Do we have any questions or comments from the board? Starting with Trustee Kirby-Gonzalez.
Thank you. Okay, it has been exciting to watch this school grow. Thank you for all your work, Principal O'Neill. My question is around just making sure that I have clarity around the contributing versus non-contributing. I see that within the budget, it comes out of supplemental grants and whatnot that we have done contributing. Is any contributing from our general budget? I know that at the beginning that this program was not self-sustaining, and my understanding is that it is now. And so I just want a little bit of clarity around that.
Yeah, I think that's a different type of contributing. So the general fund is not making a contribution with the increase in the enrollment. And what's also with the held harmless provision is it hasn't affected the charter. We were held harmless for that 1 year, but they still had increased. So they were, for the last 2 years, I think at 99.6 was their ADA. And then in the 21-22 year with their projections, they'll actually be funded at the higher. So what they come in at is what they'll be funded at for the 21-22, which is why our projections show quite a bit of an increase.
Perfect. Thank you.
Vice President Wong.
No, thank you again for the hard work. Principal O'Neill, where do you go from 100% graduation?
That's a tough question. That's definitely a challenge to make sure we don't get that, that one kid that counts for 15% of our enrollment.
Well, I noticed that I think your goal was 97, a little slightly lower, but it was, again, for those who are looking at graduation rates that are on the dashboard, that that's really impressive from where we said it's been a journey. We know that this was your freshman class, freshman recruiting class.
Right.
Now you're graduating class, so really just grateful for that. So nowhere to go but up. And so just congratulations to this, and looking forward to kind of how this is going to grow over the years. So
thank you so much.
Yeah, I'd piggyback on President or Vice President Wong's comments there. Congratulations on your first freshman to graduation class. That's outstanding. My question that I have.
I've said this. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it's this is one of those times when it's definitely everybody in the room and everybody not in the room. The district took a risk and in many ways took many risks and supported the school, and the students and parents stepped up and attended, and it's paying off. So thank you to everybody.
Thank you. That's great. The question I had is, what was the break-even number of students necessary in order to make the school completely self-sufficient? Do you know the exact number?
I don't, but I would assume it's probably somewhere around 76. I think when we looked before, it was like, I want to say it was about 76 to 80 ADA with the current staff.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's all the questions I have. Clerk Venegas.
I was when I attended this graduation, I couldn't help to think, but it reminded me of the book, The Magic of Thinking Big, and just the inspiration behind belief. So I have to give it up to Mr. Sean O'Neill for instilling that belief for the district. Before I served on the board, just the power behind what belief can do, and listening to those students, each and every single one definitely has the seed growing within them already. So definitely feeling inspired, and thank you for leading with belief and really making it manifesting what we want to see in our community. Definitely proud to be part of the team and be able to witness greatness. So thank you, Mr. Sean O'Neill, and everybody else as well.
Yeah, everybody. Thank you, everybody.
Trustee Barnes.
I just have a quick question on the way that the where was it worded? The chronic absenteeism, is that skewed at all by? Sorry, I was echoing. Is that skewed at all by the size, by COVID, the same way that, what was it before that was also skewed? Sorry, hold on, there we go. Here it is. The suspensions declining, but population size skews the percentage data. Do we think that COVID skews the absenteeism at all? And does that affect, it sounds like now our ADA is so large that we're self-sustaining, but does that impact in any way? I'm just curious.
Examining our kind of decrease in absences, a couple of things came up, and that I had mentioned at the presentation a month ago. The first is that we're smaller, So that makes it easier for us to really target kids and stay on top of them, and with multiple staff members. So it's by design. The second piece, though, is that we had a teacher who started us thinking about using, it was would use his students to students. I don't know that that's going to be a realistic thing we can do during normal schooling, but it's definitely something that we're going to try and adapt.
Sorry, you cut out a little bit on the teacher and what you were using the teacher. It was like a maybe 5 to 10 second drop, and I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. No, that's okay. It's actually the best part to talk about. So he started doing attendance as a team sport, is what we called it, where he would take the time at the beginning of class to have students contact missing students that hadn't shown up yet. I don't know that that will translate to a face-to-face classroom because they have to physically get there.
Smart. Yeah. So I was just curious. I think COVID made it a little easier for us to always attend. So anyway, but thank you for that. That's amazing. You guys are, yes, I also echo what everyone said. This is an incredible program. I'm excited about it.
Great.
Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much.
And if there's no other comments, we will gavel out of this public hearing and move on to M3, the presentation of the 2021-2022 Washington Unified School District budget. Robert Martinez, Interim Assistant Superintendent of Business Services.
Thank you, President
Go ahead.
Basadi. Thank you, President Basadi. Hopefully you can hear me. Superintendent Hildreth, good evening, and board members and members of the public. Yes, tonight we bring before you, actually, it is a public hearing. We should have had that noted there. Public hearing of the first view for the 2021-2022 budget for the school district pursuant to Education Code 42127 and 52062. We're going to have our Director of Fiscal Services, Kylie Lane, give us a little bit of a presentation to accompany the background information that was in the board agenda items. So I think we're going to have that presentation come up, and Kylie will lead us through that.
Thank you, Rob. So first, I would like to say thank you to my staff. This year with just budget development, I had rock stars in my department, so I couldn't have done this without all of them. Huge help to my fiscal analysts, shout out to them, and my accounting budget technicians. So I really appreciate the staff that I have and all the hard work that they put into to make this happen. This year was a little bit of craziness, I'd say, just slightly getting this all together in a very short amount of time. And as you know, the May revise always comes a few weeks before we actually have to bring this here before you guys as a public hearing. So a lot of the information we had, but there were significant changes in the May revise that the governor proposed. One being just with the COLA, which back in January, if you recall, the dartboard and just school services, I want to say it was projecting 0% as a COLA. So huge changes when it came to kind of what the state put out and the governor put out. So we'll see as that becomes adopted in July, and some of the additional one-time things that they did bring forward. We'll maybe have more information on that, and there could be potentially a 45-day revise that we would need to bring to you sometime in August. So with that said, some of the significant factors that we included in this process of the 21-22 budget was the enrollment. Of course, we've talked about this many times in our past presentations, just keeping a really close eye on enrollment as we're approaching next year. 22-23 is the year that they project the cliff of what we've seen in the declining enrollment. Not that we're alone in this, because it's actually every district in the state that is faced with this. So And the pandemic, of course, hasn't helped because we were already seeing it. And then, of course, that also kind of compounded what we've seen in our results. So with that, the budget adoption does have the May revise of the increase of the COLA, the cost of living adjustment, the local control funding formula increase. There is also proposed by the governor that we'll be seeing augmentation to the concentration piece of about 15%. And of course, they're asking that those additional funds that we receive would be targeted towards maybe the direct services that classified and teachers would do it for the students inside the classroom. So we've seen an increase of the base funding for the special education, 4.05%, which is pretty significant. I think it was $625 per ADA, and I think now it's close to $656, I want to say, $630 or $660. So significant increase that we'll see for that. And then, of course, the increase, the supplemental concentration grant. So next slide, please. So the ADA projection, of course, we're pretty stable at the 96%. We are stable due to number of reasons, with the hold harmless provision being funded still at the same rate as we were, or same ADA as we were from the 2021 year. And then the governor's May revise includes the mega COLA, so it's 5.07%. It's actually, the statutory COLA is 1.7% with an augmentation of 1%, and then a compounded with the 2021 unfunded statutory COLA of the 231. So with it being compounded, it came out to 5.07. So of the categorical programs that saw the 1.7% COLA, child nutrition, state preschool, and then the mandate block grant. So of course, those help in those areas, child nutrition, state preschool. Child nutrition also has the waiver where extended the free lunches for the 21-22 year. But as far as for anything past that, we haven't heard anything. And then the LCFF revenue increase that we have seen since projected at the multi-year second interim of what we were projecting it to be at the 21-22 year, it is an increase of 908,000. Next slide. So what it looks like for us in the 21-22 year, we brought it to you at the second interim projections, about 77.5 million. It is for the new COLA projections and what's being brought to you at the 21-22 budget adoption. It is, of course, like I said, the 908,000 increase. The supplemental concentration funding increased as well from the second interim projections of I think it's about 150,000 increase on that. And the revenues projections for the restricted and unrestricted resources projected at 102 million. Where I spoke about on that, we do have the ESSER 3 funds in there. So of course that's inflating what we normally see as far as our revenue projections. So of course it looks quite largely compared to what we normally see with this additional kind of funding from the CARES funding, the ESSER, the AB 86, a lot of those grants, and then just the state and the federal funding increase that we're seeing due to the pandemic. With the funded ADA is the 7,234.51, gives you kind of a base, just the factors of the ADA, the base grant, the COLA that's increased, the grade span adjustment amount. So the K3 is one of the grade spans that we do receive the class size reduction funding. And then in the 912 is the additional funding that we see for the career tech ed portion. Next slide. So this slide just kind of gives you an idea of the funding that we actually receive as far as the state funding, the federal piece, which is quite larger than what we normally see, the 19%, the state sources and the local. So the state also shows the piece of the STRS on behalf. So the GASB 84 requires the districts to recognize the STRS on behalf. So the school district for their employees. So that piece we have to show on our books as far as what the actual contribution that's being made for that piece. And then in the local, we are seeing we'll be receiving a bus reimbursement of about $800,000 for the 2 propane buses that we will be purchasing this year. It was supposed to be the end of last year, that didn't materialize, so it will be in this year. So we're recognizing those resources coming back into the district for the reimbursement. Next slide. So on the expense side, some of the continuing increases in costs that we're seeing, salary and benefits, the PERS and STRS, those did go down quite a bit, but still from what we projected at the dartboard or the that we saw at the governor's budget in January, still the May revise as far as on the PERS side, there is an increase from prior year of about 2%. And then on the STRS, a little less than 1%, still an increase. The unemployment insurance rate, we talked about this going from the 0.05% to the 1.23%, just due to the pandemic hit. We've seen the funding for the unemployment has been decreasing year over year since probably 15-16. But of course, when the pandemic hit, a lot of claims were submitted, and then that pretty much wiped out that state education fund for the unemployment rate. So of course we took on that percentage increase. The projection is that next year it should go back to kind of a flat 0.2%. But we are also have been advised by the county office to maintain the 1.23% in out years in our multi-year, just until we have a definite answer as far as what we will see that rate kind of be stable at. So until then, we are going to continue with that percentage rate increase. We are seeing a increase in special education. Even though our enrollment is declining, we are seeing an increase in special ed IEPs and those students being identified as special education. So we're seeing from our 2021 estimated actuals about $100,000 increase on the special ed. So of course, the funding that we do receive from special education does not cover what our actual costs are. So we are, that does come as a contribution from the general fund over to special ed. And then, of course, the increase in improved services for foster youth, the English learners and the low income. So the supplemental concentration piece of that and funding our Lcap. So seeing additional increased services there. Next slide. And this just gives you a breakdown of just kind of where our expenses lie as far as a percentage with the salaries, employee benefits, our contracts, capital outlay, and our projection. Most of it, I'll be honest with you, when we kind of set up that 20 or the 16 million for the federal, until we kind of have a plan, which we will have to be, we'll be bringing that plan to you shortly. As soon as I do my assurances for ESSER 3 funding, we have so many days to actually get that plan approved by the board. So as it sits right now, majority of those expenses are just kind of sitting out there on the contracted services side until we can actually distribute those into the appropriate object codes. Next slide. So our reserve levels, closing out the 2021 through the September. So that's everything we'll bring to you as our unaudited actuals in September. So our projected ending fund balance reserves, so statutory is the 3%. We do have a local mandate with board policy that allows for us to have an additional 3%. So the 6% is calculated on total expenditures, so restricted and restricted, which is why that number always fluctuates. Our unassigned uncommitted reserves of 18 million, the cash in stores, so we have revolving cash of 25,000 that we have at a bank, local bank, and then the stores, we have some items that are still in inventory in our warehouse that have been there for years. So that's still on hand, and we recognize those as far as in our reserves. And the total reserves projected, so the 15 million, which is about 22.52%, similar to the statewide for unified school districts. It's kind of a result of the spending freezes, a result of the immediate and complete shutdown of in-person instruction last year. So this is very common to see this. You know, it's partly due because of the COVID funds we've received as well. And a lot of the spending has been shifted onto addressing the needs for the pandemic, PPE and whatnot. So next slide. The multi-year projection. So these are the assumptions. As you see, kind of the projected ADA. And of course, when you look at 22-23, we do see quite a cliff there, and as far as our projections, which we expected to see that just because we have been held harmless. But then of course in that 22-23 year, it will be the prior, so even though this says projected ADA, it doesn't necessarily mean that's the funded ADA. I just want to make sure that's clear, because if our funded ADA in our 21, or if our ADA in 21-22 is higher, then our actual ADA in 22-23 will be funded on the prior, whatever is greater. So the COLA projections showing that the 21-22 years, the 5%. And then of course, there's about half of that being in the 22-23 year. Our unduplicated percentage stays pretty steady at the 67%. The consumer price index, which this was quite a bit of a jump from what we actually saw from the January governor's budget. And I think that's just because of the cost of goods going up due to the pandemic. And so of course the costs for us are also going up when it comes to our supplies, our services, and kind of the consumables. So step and column, we also project that at 2%. Of course, the PERS and STIRS rates that are set that we see, and the reserve for the economic uncertainty. Next slide.
Kylie, can I ask you a quick question on the PERS and STIRS information for 22-23? In the May revise, and I don't mean to cut your flow off here, but in the May revise, the governor proposing to pay, I think, $7 billion this year, and then out years, it's a total for a 3-year deal of 10 billion. So is this CalPERS and CalSTRS rate reflective of what's the May revise is, or is that just a normal?
And I think that's probably, are you talking about the 21-22 year, which is why it's so much lower, and then it goes to the 22-23 year of quite the increase?
Yeah.
So that, because these are the rates that are actually on the dartboard. So I'm saying that, yes, that is actually recognizing those pay downs, which I think is actually, and maybe because it's not adopted yet, and that could be partly why, because it hasn't been adopted by the governor, but the May revise still shows those rates on the dartboard as far as what services has put out.
Okay.
I'll look into it though, for sure.
Okay. I mean, they're over a 3-year period, his proposal drops the total contribution by $10 billion. So it would be hard to imagine that the CalPERS rate would be up to 26% if they're paying down 6.9 billion this year, and then $1.5 billion every other year.
Yeah, and it could be, Kobe, and it could just be because it actually hasn't been adopted by the governor, because my assumptions just go off of school services, so I don't show anything until it's actually adopted. But I will definitely look into that just to see what the actual net effect would be, and let you know what the actual decrease would be as far as for the rate.
Okay. Thank you, because that number just made me really stand up and go, oh my God.
Yeah.
Major panic attack.
Okay, next slide. So the multi-year projection. So this is on the unrestricted general fund side with the revenues. So of course, this does not include the restricted funds. So I just want to make sure that's clear. We have a balanced budget for the 21-22 year. We do have negotiations settled for the 21-22 year. And in the out years with the current kind of ADA, what we are projecting to show, we have that we will be deficit spending for the next 3 years, and we will probably end the 26-27 years. If it continues that way, we will actually be a qualified district. So just wanted to bring that to your attention, just so we can see, just based off of the information that we currently have right now, with our this expenses that we're projecting, as far as the revenue that we plan to generate based off our ADA. This is what we're seeing in our projections as far as the multi-year. Next slide. So the discussion behind the multi-year, of course, we have a positive certification for the next 3 years, which is that we are not cash negative. We have an ending fund balance still. And then our projections do include the cost of living COLAs that we are projecting for the 3 years out. And that is based off the School Services of California dashboard. So projected that deficit spending for 22, 23 and beyond. There is the impacts for negotiations in the out years for next year, the decline in enrollment that we're seeing, and of course, the one-time funding that we have received as far as the state and federal, and just reminding you kind of the dates of when those funds need to be fully expended, and having those dollars are also included in our multi-year when it looks at our restricted funds as well. So see if I missed anything on that I wanted to address. Nope, I think that's it. Next slide, please. So a recommendation is adopt a positive budget. So we've made great progress in the past 3 years fiscally. The budget adoption is positive. However, projections do show that in the next 3 years, we are deficit spending due to the decline in enrollment. We're seeing an increase in, is the goods and services that we have. So I would project that looking at this with our enrollment in the 26-27 year, we would be a qualified budget. Next slide. And again, you're gonna hear me talk about the enrollment piece. One thing I did want to mention too, I think one of the questions that Sarah had asked was just around the enrollment projections, and looking at having, looking at the demographics, or having a demographer come in and actually look at areas of growth in our district, and the impacts that we would actually see around our schools. And that is something that I have not tackled this year. I know it was something that the prior CBO he started doing that in-house. He didn't like what the projections were showing, I think, with using it outside, but that's something that I definitely, when Monique does start, that is on my list of things to tackle, just to make sure that we are capturing everything, looking at our out years and the effects that we could potentially see with the subdivisions, the surrounding areas that are developing. So again, negotiations are settled through the 21-22 year. We have the textbook adoptions projected through the 22-23 year. We're seeing that there's an increase more dramatically in the near term as far as for the goods and services due to the pandemic. And as what was also included in the agenda was all of the other funds. So the assumptions for the adult ed, we had many of the others, cafeteria fund, preschool fund. So some of those other things. One thing that I would like to mention is bringing back the deferred maintenance, the Fund 14, which the board would approve to, and maybe that be part of the end of the year closure, is when we close the books, is having actual having a transfer over to the Fund 14. So I plan to bring that back. We used to have Fund 14, which is the deferred maintenance fund. That allowed the board to make that decision to have those funds transferred over to do modifications, some facility improvements that are needed that don't fall under kind of the Measure Z. And it doesn't mean that it can't necessarily always, it can't be shifted back to the general fund, but just so we kind of don't lose that again, that was part of one of the tier 1 cuts was the deferred maintenance budget. So I plan to bring a resolution to one of the future board meetings to have that discussion. And next slide, please. So our next steps in September, I will be bringing the unaudited actuals to you. And in December is when we do the audit of the financial statements. And then we'll kind of cross over, like as you see here, we're doing the budget adoption at the next board meeting at the end of June. And if needed, a 45-day revise will come in August. And then we have the first interim in December, and then the second interim in March, and then that cycle just kind of repeats itself. Next slide. That is all I have for you. If you have any questions, either Rob or myself can answer those for you.
First, we are going to go to public comment, if there is any.
I do show that Danny Langford has her hand risen.
Okay. Go ahead, Danny.
Yes, I do want to speak on this one. Thank you. First of all, just a stickler on technicalities. Should Governor Brown be there for the top of this transmittal? I think we need to change that, especially before you pass it as a board. It needs to be correct. And I have concerns about the deficit spending, which I've been very vocal about. We're not going to know until the dust settles after this COVID mess. And I so agree with the need for our deferred maintenance back. That's a huge reason that so many of our campuses have fallen in decline, because we haven't had that for a while. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. Now we'll go to board comments. I'm going to start off on this one because I have a couple of thoughts. So with the mega COLA being at 5.7%, is there any, or 5.07%, is there any way to put some of that money away for 22-23 for the cliff? And then I've heard Vice President Wong say that birth rates for this year are incredibly low, and that think 5 to 6 years out from now, that means TKK enrollment is going to be down pretty much exponentially in our community. So my question is there a way to utilize some of this additional revenue in the COLA by putting it into, say, something like a PERS trust or STRS trust, and then that's something that we can turn the spigot on in really lean times? If we utilize that money now, we can store that money away in a trust, and then when it comes time to pay the piper for these declining enrollment numbers, we can turn that money back on out of the trust and have it have less of an impact on the general fund.
So let me just say, like, as far as looking at the COLA and decreasing expenses, so the only way we could do it is by decreasing the expenses. So it would be like freezing the spending, cutting travel and I mean, there's ways you can do that, but I think that's more of a decision I think that you guys would need to make. But it's obviously decreasing your expenditures, really looking at what we have budgeted on the unrestricted side. It can't necessarily be on the restricted side, but it's definitely the unrestricted side.
All right, thank you. I'm going to go over to Trustee Barnes. Anything? Nope. Okay. Trustee Kirby-Gonzalez.
Okay, thank you so much for this presentation. Looking through, I appreciated hearing that conversations will be coming about demographers, whether it's done internally or not. When I drive by and see new housing, it always causes me pause because we know our kids don't come in perfect little class size bundles at the right schools where we have room. So I also always am concerned about the impact of, which schools and where the building is. And so I think having some support there, because there is definitely building happening in our city. We see it, but we also know that there's declining enrollment with our kids. So one piece as I looked at this was thinking about the impacts of special education. And we have, of course, a legal obligation or moral obligation to serve our students well. But one thing maybe Assistant Superintendent Panu as well can be thinking about moving forward is I know that we're heavy in terms of how much we're paying outside for OT and for speech therapy. I know that they're hard to fill positions, but how can we maybe capture those and bring those back, those positions back into our district so that we're using our staff? And would there be a cost savings there? I think is an important place to look. And I appreciated bringing up the deferred maintenance conversation to be having too in the future. So thank you. Those were my only thoughts, and I appreciate this work.
Okay, Vice President Wong.
Hi, Kylie. So I have a question. I'm just trying to understand. This is based on May Revise and the impact of the deferrals, because the governor didn't propose paying off our entire deferrals. How does that impact us as we think kind of looking forward and having to shift? We're deficit spending and then we have a deferral. So
I know
it's impacting, right? So
it's future deferrals. So it's actually next year's deferrals. So it didn't impact current year deferrals. So we still have this year's deferrals of starting in February, March, April, May, and then the June apportionment that we receive, 100% of that was deferred into July. So then it's kind of like a rainbow. So February actually doesn't come to us until like November, and then March comes in October. So the way they do it is kind of bonkers, but that's the way they're doing it. So for next year, the only thing that they're planning to defer out is the June apportionment. So again, what that apportionment is typically when they true up, when they do the certification of P2, whatever that additional or that remaining funding that we're going to receive in June, they completely defer it out to July. So it's one month, but it helps them
but it doesn't help us because we have to pay it out in the current year, right? So
yeah, correct.
So, but will we true up? I mean, I'm still concerned with deficit spending. Everybody's concerned with deficit spending, but the deferral doesn't actually help us. It actually hurts us, right? In terms of our accounting, like I just want to be publicly transparent about like it's kind of we're also borrowing money because we're having to take next year's money to pay this year's.
Correct. People. So that's where our ending fund balance really helps our district, is that we do have quite a hefty ending fund balance. So that's helping us with the cash deferrals, and as well as the ESSER funds that we've received, the CARES funding, and without us spending 100% of that, they did front load quite a bit of that funding when they apportioned those funds to us. So that's helped us with cash. So of course, cash is very different than budget and expenses. So as long as we have cash, things look good. It's when we run out of cash, that's when it's not good.
And that's our qualified status is based on cash in bank, right? So
correct.
Can you, and just for full transparency, and then actually just a reminder to myself, how much is that deferral for us? How much is that costing us? Even though it's a month for us, it seems like it's not, but it's actually when we're accounting and you're looking at it on the, how much of it? How much?
Yeah, gosh, I want to
I ask every time, Kylie.
I know. I want to say, I want to say it's like 17 million that we're experiencing in this year.
Right.
Is what's being deferred into next year. And our June apportionment is typically like 9 million. So it's only a percentage of the February, the March, the April, the May, and then 100% of the June. So we get hit harder in the June apportionment, but overall, I want to say the actual deferrals that we're experiencing it's 15 to 17 million.
But the June one, okay, yeah. So I mean, so that's just for full transparency, people understand that it's like we're actually taking next year's money and having to reapply it backwards. So it's deficit spend. It impacts our deficit spending because
Correct.
The state's borrowing money from the locals.
Yeah, and that's where I brought that resolution earlier this year too of internal temporary borrowing, just so we had kind of a safekeeping there if we came into a position where we weren't able to make payroll, because that would not be good.
I think everyone always looks at our revenues, and I think this is the time when we say this is why we have a healthy reserve, but it's still not fair that we're like carrying 20 billion, or 20 million, sorry, for a number of reasons, including the unemployment, but all the things, right, Kylie? Yep. So thank you.
And I even think when it comes to just the volatility of just school finance, I mean, from what we saw in January versus what we have seen in May, it's a huge swing. So it's just so uncertain as far as what 3 or 4 months is going to do and what information comes out to us. So
in 20 days, you will know more and yet come back to us in 45 days with a new budget that hopefully, that's the bigger one, because you're tracking all the negotiations with the deferrals, but I think it's important for the public to understand that this budget right here also includes that deferral where we're borrowing from the future to pay the present.
Mm-hmm.
So, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that publicly. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Wong. And seeing and hearing no further questions or comments, I will gavel this public hearing closed. Now moving on to N1, information discussion items. As the update presentation from the City of West Sacramento regarding tennis court resurfacing as part of the city's Bright Park Improvement Plan. Robert Martinez, Interim Assistant Superintendent of Business Services.
Yes, thank you again, President Posadi. What we have tonight is a little bit of information regarding, again, Bright Park's improvements. Bright Park is managed and maintained by the City of West Sacramento as part of the public park on a district property. So the tennis courts are located and they're identified in a picture and referenced in a plan that sits adjacent to the Club West building. Tonight, I believe we have Tracy Michelle, who is the Director of Parks and Recreation for the City of West Sacramento, to give us just a little bit of information about this plan and where we are.
Thank you. Good evening, President Pizzati and trustees, Superintendent Hildreth, members of the public. I am Tracy Michael, Parks and Recreation Director for the city, and I want to thank you for allowing me to participate in your meeting to share information about another round of proposed improvements at Bright Park. I also really want to give a shout out to Angie Nichols and Terry Souza, who've been just wonderful with their ongoing coordination efforts with city staff helping us with this project and all of our joint use facility planning efforts. And we have a lot of those that are in play right now. The per capita grant program was funded through Proposition 68, which was approved in June of 2018. It offers $185 million statewide to local governments or park and rec districts on a per capita basis generally. For recreation-focused projects, including things ranging from trails to landscaping to play equipment to sports equipment, play fields, courts, water features. And it does require match funding of 20% if the project is not located in a disadvantaged area. But fortunately for us, Bright Park is actually included in a disadvantaged area based on State Parks mapping tool used this grant program. Our allocation at the city is $177,952. That is the most common allocation granted to cities statewide. Every city in Yolo County, in Sacramento County has basically received the same amount of money. It's guaranteed funding, but we still have to apply to the state to receive the money to make sure that we're proposing to use the funds for eligible uses under the grant guidelines. We have to submit our application before the end of this year. We have to encumber the funds by June of 2022, and we have to complete the projects by December of 2023. So using that time frame and some of the planning efforts that are already underway, we felt that the tennis courts at Bright Park would be a really great fit for this grant program. The tennis courts were actually included in the city and the school district's joint use facilities agreement back in 2015. They were actually identified as pickleball courts back then. Pickleball is a growing trend, and we get a lot of inquiries from our community about having more access to both tennis and pickleball courts. Since then, the courts have been used really exclusively by Riverbank students for a number of reasons. I mean, primarily the students need to use the courts and do use the courts during the school day, and improvements need to be made in order to allow those courts to be secure during the day for students and then accessible by the public after school hours on weekends during the summer. The courts are in need of resurfacing. The striping is faded. It isn't designed right now to accommodate both pickleball and tennis, and there isn't any lighting out there. So what we're proposing is a complete resurfacing of the courts that would accommodate both tennis and pickleball activities, new fencing around the perimeter of the courts, which would allow for secure use by students during the day, and then secure use by the public at night, so they wouldn't have access to school property if they were using the courts. We would hope to have the courts available to the public after school hours, on weekends, and during the summer. The graphic that was included kind of shows a very general concept, but we would, once we move forward, move with district staff and to refine the scope of work. We are proposing lighting for extended play. Oh, thank you. In the evening, and also provides additional security for the area because that is generally a very dark portion of the property. And so when the courts are not being used for tennis, we could still have some low-level lighting available for security measures. We would include new netting for both tennis and pickleball, and the total project cost is really about $180,000. So it fits very nicely with the amount of funding that we have available. It's a project that could be completed fairly quickly. Once we submit our formal application to the state and it's approved, we could move forward quickly to complete the procurement and bid process, and then work with the district and the faculty to make sure that when we make the improvements, we're limiting impacts to student use of the site. But we can certainly accomplish this project within the 1-year time frame, and once we're able to move forward with it. And we're really excited because this would result in offering the first publicly accessible free courts in the city. Right now, the only tennis courts and pickleball activities that we have available are primarily at the recreation center. We do have a sport court at Bright Park that was constructed with our last round of improvements, but it's not permanently set up for tennis. It's often used as basketball, and to set it up for tennis or pickleball takes some planning. So this would provide much improved accessibility, and we know our community members would appreciate it, and we hope that the students would be able to enjoy it as well. I welcome your feedback, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Sorry. Okay, is there anybody here wishing to make a public comment?
No public comment has been received.
Okay, thank you very much, Mario. Let's see, questions from the board. Trustee Kirby-Gonzalez.
I just have a comment. Thank you for staying with us through the evening and sharing this with us. This is so exciting. I remember when we first got the Kaboom Park in, we all helped work on that. And now every time I drive by, seeing how the park is used and the shade structures that are out there, and more families are getting out and enjoying the space. And I think it's a really special partnership. And I just appreciate all of your work, Tracy, with this. And I think it's exciting. And I think lighting is the key thing that we often hear from the community around the Riverbank School. So this sounds wonderful and has my full support. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Kirby-Gonzalez. Vice President Wong?
No, thank you. Well, Vice President or President Pizzati is going to ask.
Okay.
But did you note when the courts would be completed?
Well, it all depends on when we start the project. We are ready to move forward with the state and submit our application right away. It really, resurfacing of the tennis courts takes 2 weeks max to do. The fencing and the lighting is a little more involved. So, I mean, we could have this done in a few months once we get approval from the state that the project is approved and deemed eligible under the grant program. And it would take a few months to bid the project and a few months to complete it. So our goal was to have this done as soon as we can, because we think it would be great if we could get it done even before the school year starts, to have everything in place. That's probably a little optimistic, but we would make sure that we do time it so that we reduce impacts to the student use. It would have been so nice if we could have had the courts completed this past year, because we received a lot of inquiries from the public about trying to have access to tennis, because that was one of the permitted outdoor activities. But that was the impetus for us to really focus on prioritizing this project and getting it going. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was going to be my question, as to when can we start? When can it be completed? So thank you for that information. Clerk Venegas, Trustee Barnes?
No, for me, it was just, you said the students use it during school hours, and I'm assuming with the renovations, so it's closed off to the public. It's very clear that it's closed off to the public while students are using it. And then is there signage or some sort of, let's say somebody new to the community, knowing that it is a community park or community courts, is that part of the thought process as well?
We would have signage. Yeah, it's a great question. And we would actually have gates that are locked. Similar to how Elkhorn Park is operated. Elkhorn Park is only available to the public after school hours. So we coordinate with the school to open the gate to the park after school is out, and then it's locked before school begins the next morning. So we would just physically have the public access gates locked until after school hours.
Thank you.
Trustee Barnes?
I grew up playing tennis, so I'm excited. I was actually like, only 2? We're going to have to get more. So I can't wait.
Great. Thank you, Tracy. And we appreciate your update, and thank you for staying with us to give us this presentation. We really appreciate you.
Thank you so much for your time and for your support.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, moving on to N2, after school care programs. Rahele Atabaki, Coordinator of Induction and After School Programs and Director of Preschool. Hello,
Good
Rahele.
evening. Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm here to give you an update on, like an annual update of the state of our childcare for the past year. So let's go to the next slide. Thank you. This is just to let you know what sites have childcare. All our sites, all our elementary sites have some kind of childcare. Bridgeway Island and Southport have the YMCA. Champions is at Stonegate, and Stonegate also has ACES. Westmore, Westfield, Elkhorn, and Riverbank all have ACES. Next slide, please.
Rahale, was that supposed to say pay for fee or pay for free on there?
It was supposed to say pay for fee.
Okay, I wasn't sure. I didn't know if there was a scholarship, but I was gonna ask later, but.
This is what happens when I type without my glasses. I cannot see.
I understand. Okay, thank you for the clarification. Yeah,
yes.
Thank you.
This slide is just informational. I'm not going to read it, but it's our guidelines on qualifying for the ACES program. It's also available on our website under the our childcare tab. If parents want to read it, our new parents might not know. Next slide, please. So when school started on August 19, we, all our childcare programs were ready on that first day. ACES, Champions, and YMCA, we were all ready. First day doors were open for our essential worker families. And I know it's hard to think back because it seems like it was 10 years ago, but at that time it was a big deal to have all of this ready to go. But you know, our staff were ready to come back to work, and we modified the hours so that way we could help families who are working and needed a place for their students to be during the day. Since we were fully virtual, we modified Westmore Oaks and Riverbank hours to go from 8 a.m. in the morning to 2:30. That way they had a place to be during school hours. And we also kept Westfield, Elkhorn, and Stonegate at a different time to accommodate people who needed later hours. So they, at those three sites, we went from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. Next slide, please. Something that we had to change was what the staff did. So we, staff had to be responsible for monitoring students logging on for distance learning and making sure that they have access to the link and they know how to log on and stay on task. And all of this sounds really easy right now, but it was really, really difficult. Our staff, as you know, were trained to help with a little bit of homework and then do enrichment and do activities with kids after school. And it was bumpy to start. We had the continuous, let's plan this, let's do it, let's look back and see what's not working. The teachers would call me and say, my student's not logged in, or my student is not paying attention. And I feel right now when I reflect back, you know, I had to go into the classroom and talk to staff and say, this is not how you do it. You have to make sure. And the key word was being flexible. Everyone was so flexible and open to taking suggestions. I'm sorry. I already cried making this slideshow, and I said, I'm not going to be emotional, but it was kind of hard reflecting back on everything that happened this past year. Anyway, next slide, please. I'm sorry.
No, it was, Rahale, just thank you. Thank you. We know it wasn't easy. I know that these are words on paper. I think we were here who were living the moment. I think we keep on saying it. Without you, I'm going to cry. Without you, those families would have nowhere to go. So it's okay to reflect back, and you know, it was hard work, and we are so grateful. And I know so many families are so grateful. And it wasn't easy. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. The other thing that we had to think about is making the school sites flexible, because some families, it was, even though their kids went to Elkhorn, but you know, it was easier to drop them off at Bridgeway, and things that we had normally had never done had to happen just so that everybody has was able to drop their kids, and a lot of talking with the state and making sure that we're not out of compliance. And luckily, we were able to make it work. And even staff that their children were not in our district were able to register. We made an MOU with the city, and we took in students that were not Washington Unified and made it work. Next slide, please. So overall, through ACES program, we ended up serving 50 students at Riverbank, 45 at Westmore, 41 at Elkhorn, 18 at Stonegate, and 30 at Westfield. So roughly about 184 students were served through the ACES program. Next slide, please. And then Bridgeway ended up having 25 students, and Southport had 15. So about 40 students went through the YMCA. Next slide, please. And Champions had 25 students at Stonegate. Next slide. So altogether, we were able to serve 249 students that were mainly essential worker families and needed a spot and a place to get through the year. So I think that was really, really helpful. I know I did hear back from a lot of families that they were very, very grateful to have this service. Next slide, please. So we did open enrollment for next year back in February, and it's trickling in. It's not as it was last year, but I think families are still deciding. So I'm getting new enrollments every day, but this is where we are right now. We have, like Stonegate, as always, we referred some to Champions, but there are no wait lists at Riverbank, no wait lists at Westmore, and or at Westfield. And Elkhorn, we have, next slide, I'll talk about Elkhorn on the next slide. So for Elkhorn families that didn't qualify under the ACES program, we did create a pay for fee service last year. We weren't able to use it, but for the next coming year, it will be $350 a month, and they will have to follow the ACES rules and the hours and everything. But I think I explained that to families; they were okay with it. So as of right now, there's nobody on any of these schools on a wait list. Except Stonegate, and Stonegate, they do have options for Champions. I did create a wait list for about 10 families. If spots open, they can join ACES. And I've told them that they need to wait till school opens. Next slide, please. I wanted to include this here just to acknowledge, I couldn't put everyone, but when I say we, I'm talking about Jennifer Hall, I'm talking about Angie, Pina, people at the city, Jennifer Moore at YMCA, Shelly at Champions, and all the people that I mentioned here. These are the people who they're probably sick of me, but seriously, we could not have done what we did last year without working together. I am beyond grateful and proud of everyone who pulled it together and made this happen. So thank you, everyone. If I haven't said thank you, I really, really appreciate what you did.
Well, we're proud of you, Rahale. So, I mean, don't think doesn't go unnoticed what kind of work that you've put in to get this all going through. It was a Herculean task, and you pulled it off. So thank you so very much. Quickly, I want to go to see if there's any public comment on this item. There is none. So we'll start with Trustee Barnes at the end.
Rahale, I'm so thankful for you. I know we've talked a lot this year, and I appreciate your emotion because it was that emotional for all of us. And what an awesome community at Elkhorn we have, district-wide we have, but personally my child's at Elkhorn, and that $350 for next year is going to be huge for a lot of us. And we can keep our kids together and allowing us to have that interaction after school especially in our dual immersion program, is so huge. And I just can't tell you how many text threads we were on with thank you, Rahale, thank you, Casey, thank you, all of the staff that helped keep our kids safe this year and keep our kids socialized this year, because we were all going crazy. And even though, you know, we didn't always, it was just, everything was in such flux this year, and it was just so, as you said, crazy and pulling your hair out. We're just so thankful. And I think these programs are awesome. I'm super excited to get back that normalcy, and Lucy's always excited about Kid Zone, and I can leave her till 4 and I never worry that, you know, oh, she's bored or I need to go pick her up. She always has great stories about friends, about staff, about teachers. So just know how very, very appreciative you and all of the staff are at every campus. And thank you for all that you've done.
Thank you.
Clerk Venegas.
There you go.
I wrote right here. Hi, Rahale. Oh my goodness. Let's give Rahale and the team a round of applause.
That's a good picture.
You guys did an amazing job. I was just speaking about you earlier today, and you were the first person that I was introduced to as a provider before sitting on the board. And you did a phenomenal job then, and I know that through COVID, everybody felt your heart, and everybody knew you made everybody feel safe. And personally, I can say that I stopped in to see Casey and Jennifer, and everybody was just so flexible and so willing. And it really just speaks volumes to our community, and more so just the leadership that exists here. So thank you. I'm glad to see you today. I get to say hi. I was all excited. I was losing energy. And then seeing you and just again feeling that you have everybody's back, and you truly represent what Washington Unified stands for. So thank you so much once again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Trustee Kirby Gonzalez.
Thank you. I'm thinking back to I don't know, just 5 years ago, and so many of our sites did not have reliable childcare. I mean, we're here to serve and teach children, but our families also desperately needed help and support with childcare. And the work that has happened just in a short amount of time is really incredible. I mean, even without COVID, it's incredible, right? And then I don't know anybody like you. I don't know anybody that worked with families the way that you have through a school district to change schedules and move things around. And I mean, let's be very frank that it was a cruel time, and there were many cruel things said and done around emotions of families sometimes. And so the work that you did was always with your heart. And Washington Unified, I think, was such a leader because of you in this space. We know that COVID-19 impacted our essential workers, as you spoke to, that needed to be served. We also know that it disproportionately impacted working moms. We know that in education that we have a disproportionate number of working moms. And so by also serving students outside of Washington Unified, you helped our employees come to work every day. And that is huge. And because of that, less of our students had substitutes, and they had stability with their teachers. So there are just so many places that you impacted, and I just can't thank you enough. And as we think about the work with all of our providers and now having really strong partnerships, I'm just so thrilled and excited. And as even in my own home, we've relied on the YMCA in the past. And as we balance, you know, I have a husband whose schedule changes and we don't know what it will look like. And the fear is really alleviated knowing, well, there's a program out there that will help us depending on what our need will be. And so I want to thank you because our families across the district have had that fear kind of taken away, and you've really made a huge impact. So thank you for this update. I'm so glad that it is a regular update because I think it's really important to highlight and to talk about
all of the ways that we serve our students. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Kirby Gonzalez. Vice President Wong.
I think it also needs to be clear, this isn't Rahale's full-time job. This is in addition to her moving, touching, and inspiring the pizza program for teachers. So this is an add-on that we actually made a couple of years ago that you took on with grace, and it was a hard task, like to Trustee Kirby. You know, we had set vision, and some of us were pushing about, you know, for childcare and expansion for quite some time. And we said, Rahale, you're so great, do this too, right? And so it has been, you've done it with such humility and such grace, and it was a crazy time. And we, you know, some of us said, we need the childcare, irregardless of what's happening. And you stepped up. You stepped up, right? As much as you inspire our first year teachers, our second year teachers, you know, you inspired others. You helped others go through that. And you are such a blessing. And thank you so much for supporting the mixed delivery system, because that, again, was yet a new thing that some crazy board member said, hey, you can do a mixed delivery system, right? Like another one, right? And you got that done. We did a lot of things, and you listened to us and you implemented with grace and humility. And we're so, so grateful, right? But I just wanted to highlight, this is not your only job for us, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, it's thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Wong. And I'll just say my thanks as well. You've really done amazing work. I remember when I first came on the board, I was looking at the YMCA program at Bridgeway and saw that it had so very few spots available for such a very large school. And, you know, basically we asked, can there be more? Can it be done? And the answer was yes, and it happened. And now there's an incredibly large growth in the number of spots available. So I just want to thank you for finding a way to make that work. That really does help the community at one of the larger schools to, you know, have space for their kids when they go back to work, you know. So I guess I do have a question though. My question is, do we know what the enrollment is for the YMCA for this coming year? And since YMCA and Champions are both licensed childcare providers, do they have certain parameters that they have to work in that are different than ACES and KidZone?
No, it's very similar. The difference is that the hours are flexible, so parents can pick up and drop off anytime
Later.
versus ACES, which is very strict with the hours.
Okay.
I talked to the YMCA director yesterday, and she said they haven't opened enrollment yet for next year, but they are taking names. So I've had a lot of parents call about the YMCA at Bridgeway, and I've told them contact Alexis, and she's taking names. So they're going to start opening up soon, and they also are offering summer programs. So
no, my daughter is in the summer program there for the entirety of the summer because mom and dad are back at work. So yeah, I totally understand, and you know that's been like a tradition in our family since for a lot more than $350 a month. Yeah, so that's been a tradition in our family since we first got to the school. So I really do appreciate that summer aspect of it as well, the summer camps. So that's great. And as well at Southport, we were there for the beginning of summer camps at Southport too as well. So thank you again, Rahale. We appreciate your hard work. And as like Jackie said, this is just one of your hats. And so we do appreciate, but it's probably one of the most, you know, enduring and so hard and so touching. And I could see the emotion as it is probably one of the hardest jobs that you have. So I do appreciate you and all you put of yourself into that job.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
No problem. And now, moving on to the consent agenda. Do we have anything that we are going to remove from the consent agenda? Anyone? Bueller? No? Okay. Then do we have a motion on the consent agenda?
I move.
Moved by Vice President Wong. Second by Clerk Venegas. I'm sorry, Clerk Venegas.
It's
I'm
only
so
9
sorry.
PM too.
I know, I'm really squirrely. We'll start with Clerk Venegas. Trustee Barnes.
Aye.
Vice President Wong.
Aye.
Trustee Kirby Gonzalez.
Aye.
And I too vote aye. The consent agenda is adopted. Moving on to action items. Sorry about that, Al. Yeah, I got that. I see it. There we go. Okay. All right, action items. P1, the approval of the tentative agreement between the California School Employees Association and its Riverview chapter number 168 and the Washington Unified School District for the period beginning July 1, 2021 and ending in June 30, 2024. Kamaljeet Panu, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources.
President Pizzotti, trustees, and Superintendent Hildreth, we're requesting the board to take action to approve the tentative agreements between CSEA Chapter 168. We'd like to take a moment before taking action just to thank both district and CSEA members that worked collaboratively to come up with this agreement that is presented for you before you this evening.
Questions?
All right, thank you. Is there any public comment? No public comment on this item. Questions or comments from the board? We've all heard this pretty much time or two, so seeing and hearing none, do we have a motion?
I second.
Moved by Clerk Venegas, second by Vice President Wong. Vice President Wong.
Aye.
Clerk Venegas. Trustee Kirby Gonzalez.
Aye.
Trustee Barnes.
Aye.
And I too vote aye. That measure is adopted. Moving on to E2. The approval of the tentative agreement between the Washington Unified School District and the West Sacramento Teachers Association for the period beginning July 1, 2021 and ending June 30th, 2024. I thought we rolled this over for 1 year. I'm sorry.
So once again, we are requesting the board to take action for the tentative agreement. To answer your question, there is language that is going to allow for successor agreements to full reopeners once we do return back for the 2021-22 school year. So there wasn't two articles were opened, but part of the agreement going forward is that additional articles can be opened during the time period. So it's not a closed contract for the out years.
Okay. I'm sorry. It just struck me as odd that it would go ending date of the contract as June 30, 2022 or the TA or 2024, I would say. Okay. I just want to make sure that we're not running afoul anywhere of what we approve. Okay. Is there any public comment on this item?
No public comment was received.
And any comments from the board?
Okay, just would like clarify your comment.
Yeah.
Help me understand.
Okay. So in my comment is, as I read the title of this, it says beginning July 1, 2021 and ending in June 30th, 2024. My understanding is we were just covering we're rolling over for 1 year, the contract, the full contract, only opening salary items for this year. That was my understanding. The way this reads to me in the title is we're rolling over for 3 years, the full contract, and only opening two items that we opened to discuss contract to salary and benefits. So that is my question. I think this would need to be amended, wouldn't it?
Then you would need to amend the first one to P12 for 2024 as well.
But they actually negotiated
Oh, they did?
the full
Okay.
contract.
Okay.
That's why my question was that I'm wondering if this was just maybe a cut and paste of CSEA's contract, which was an actual full negotiated, full itemized list of articles that were negotiated and adopted in their TA, whereas WSTA, they only negotiated two articles, right? Compensation and member benefits, and that was just for 1 year. They'll be back at the bargaining table in the subsequent school year to negotiate the successor full-term contract.
It should only be for 1 year.
It should only be for 1 year. Yeah.
So, and again, this portion did precede me.
Yeah, no, I'm not.
So, but I do believe, from my understanding, that there was the option to open the full contract for negotiation, but then the sunshine was on two articles, which was that you are correct on the compensation and the health benefits, and part of the agreement is for the 1 year and then reopen the successor agreement the following year. So I do believe you are correct on that.
Okay.
So the motion has to be amended.
So the motion would be an amendment to that, which would say,
Or you want to, do we have time to bring it back?
To bring it back to the next board meeting?
My piece would be, since the board seems to be leading this conversation, is if we go back, and can this come back to us to be approved, and we make sure that the language is exactly how it's understood by our by district staff and our,
as well as our WSTA partners.
that's what I mean.
Yes.
Yeah, because
Yes,
I don't.
We can bring this back. We have time to bring this back for at the next board meeting.
In 2 weeks from now.
Yes.
Yeah, because it begins July 1, 2021.
Yeah.
So we
Right.
do have time.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
I know it's only day 6, so.
Right.
Great.
Right.
We will bring that. We'll bring that back with clarification.
Okay. So we are going to table this item until the next board meeting when we have an appropriate.
Would you like to move to table?
I will move to table.
I will second.
Moved by President Pizzotti, second by Vice President Wong. Trustee Kirby Gonzalez.
Aye.
Vice President Wong.
Aye.
I too vote aye. Clerk Venegas. Trustee Barnes.
Aye.
Okay, this motion is tabled, this item is tabled until the June 24th meeting. Is that what it is? June 24th? Yeah, June 24th meeting. Q1, board governments, the Equity Governance Workshop, June 16th, 2021. Superintendent Cheryl Hildreth. Yeah, and the dates on it are right. Right.
You're on.
Okay. Oh, you hear me now? Okay. So excited about bringing forward this equity work, not only for the district, but really it starts with the board. And so in order to close the equity gaps observed and experienced in schools, It is essential that educational leaders build capacity and shift the paradigm of a school system that was not designed to yield successful outcomes for all students. Thus, at the regular board meeting on July 9th in 2020, the board approved a contract to utilize the services of Nicole Anderson and Associates to provide services to support a systems approach for educational leaders and teams from all educational levels to use an equity lens to empower them to be proactive and responsive to the diverse needs of the community that we serve. Due to the pandemic, the work with Nicole Anderson and Associates did not begin. Thus, as we prepare for the 2021-22 school year, we are ready to move forward with the equity work in WUSD. One of the commitments is to provide 4 half-day sessions for the governance team. These interactive sessions will focus on how the governance team can serve students through an equity lens. The governance team will reflect on the history of public education, develop a deeper understanding of the concept of educational equity, and reflect on its role in interrupting equity gaps that exist in the data. So to start this conversation, we're scheduling our first governance equity session next Wednesday, that's the 16th, from 4 to 7 p.m. and it will be here in room 75, and looking forward to engaging with you all in this work. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Is there any public comment on this board governance item?
No public comment received.
All right. Is there any comments or questions from the board?
I have one.
Trustee Kirby-Gonzalez.
Thank you. I am looking forward to this, and I'm happy that we can now have the time and space and do this all together. My question is, and it doesn't have to be answered now, it can be thought about and discussed when we all meet for this, but how does this complement or work with the WINs that we also brought in that are working with staff, the equity team that I know you're working with? So how does it all sort of fit together, and is to make sure that we have common messages and goals? And so that doesn't have to be done now, but something to think about that we can address there.
Lee, can you hear me? Something that we'll discuss on Wednesday, and just to begin, and I have some of those same questions as I am beginning to have the time to review some of the work that has already been done. I want to specifically talk to some of the participants who benefited from some of those trainings to help in understanding what we learned from that and how we build upon that information.
Okay, great. Thank you. Vice President Wong.
No, just thank you. That I'm going to turn off my microphone and use yours. I know this is the work that we hired you for, and we are past that tunnel. Excited to kind of move forward with it.
Great. Thank you, Vice President Wong. And I just piggyback on those comments as well. This is what we're finally here to do. And it seems like we've had fire after fire to put out, and now we can finally breathe and get down to the business of the programs that we want to work on. So I'm just super thrilled about this. Clerk Venegas. Christy Moore, you're good too? Okay. All right. Unfortunately, board and superintendent comments missed its placement on the agenda. So so I guess everybody will be thrilled to not have to listen to us with our superintendent comments and board comments. But I will just thank the first partner for coming out to Fiery Ginger Farms, and so we would like to thank the first partner, Jennifer Newsom, for coming out and visiting our kids today at Fiery Ginger Farms, as well as seeing the whole process and everything like that. So with that, we're going to future board agenda items. R1, confirm quarantine guidelines after June 15th, 2021. R2, finalize board governance handbook updates and board self-evaluations. R3, resolution to support transgender students. I like them. I like them all. Is there any future board agenda items that anyone would like to add?
I don't know if it's a future agenda item or more of a board update. Kamaljeet, Mr. Panu, on your 6th day, is that I was talking to the city manager at the chamber event, and they have priority for the new housing for teachers, which is a really good selling point. Yes, I know that we should actually kind of think about, like, as we recruit new teachers. And I have been pitching West Sacramento. It's a great place to raise kids, to live, all of that. If there are more programs like that, we can look into. So apparently those new fancy ones right across from Drake's, very cool place to live. Like, they have priority, and I guess, and priority for teachers, but also I think reduced pricing for teachers. So just a heads up. And I know that also in the 2x2, maybe we can bring it up. But there is money in the budget for teacher residency programs for development for teachers. So I would love us to look into that as, again, making sure that we have a livable city is important to a lot of young teachers who are coming in, and we might not, I think we actually have highest paid in YOLO, right? All staff, but and the programs are primarily for new teachers.
Right.
But yeah, so just for future kind of thinking, but it definitely was struck that we didn't know that teachers were prioritized in those new developments. So if we can pitch that, that'd be great.
That's great. Clerk Venegas.
This is just because there was something that came up about 3 times in the last 2 weeks, and it was just when we're thinking about inviting the public, we're doing our board meetings in front of the public. Just hasn't been. We haven't talked about it, obviously, or at least I didn't have an answer. So just maybe putting that, or at least setting a goal. For that to happen.
So we did actually have a conversation with some. Well, I think it was the city manager, 2x2 first, and then we brought it up with the city manager again at the State of the City address, or at least I had a chance to talk to them a little bit more. And they're thinking sometime, they're coming back in July sometime to the city chambers, and that's kind of their beta test to see how they can operate things in a COVID friendly manner, but still be in person. And they said once they get their stream running and they get their operations running, they'll get back to us on when we can actually come use those facilities. There was a public comment tonight that said that, we're not meeting in person, but actually we are meeting in person, and we have space available for the public to come meet and to visit us. And we have been since March. So I would just, request the public to be cognizant of the fact that we've been meeting at Bright Campus, and we've had plenty of space available, just nobody's attended. So we are in person, and we can, have public come and visit and watch our board meetings live.
And we have to sign up, that would be clear that they have to sign up.
Right.
So no one shows up.
Right. Okay. And is there any other public, or is there any other future board agenda items? Okay, with that, the agenda is clear.
Wait,
Oh,
we thank the first partner, but I want to thank all the staff for all the graduations and promotions last week.
Absolutely.
So that was fun. So I know no board comments, but I know first partner is important, but also our staff who we haven't had a graduation or promotions in 2 years. So thank you for all of that.
That's right. Thank you, Vice President Wong. And with that, the agenda is clear, and we are adjourned.